Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this month's episode of Walk Worthy. I'm Lindsay. I'm here with Aaron again. And we were really excited to see the response back from the episode last month. There was lots of comments and sharing. We were super excited about that. So this month's topic is something that I think a lot of women can relate to, and it is insecurity. So let's start. Where does insecurity come from? What is it? Let's define it.
Insecurity, I think it, like you said, affects us all, and I think it comes from, really at root, any place that we've placed our confidence or our worth in something earthly, some place we shouldn't have placed it, if that makes sense. Paul tells us in Philippians that we should put no confidence in the flesh, but really, for most of us, the areas that we find confidence or worth have very much to do with fleshly or earthly things. And when those get shaken, then we find ourselves insecure.
Right. So some of the fleshly things that we might put confidence in are, well, ourselves, I guess, specifically, you know, like it's under our power to do these things, to become these things, to portray these things, and even like comparing with other people, you know, like I want to be, and I see what everybody else's life is like, and I want mine to at least be at the level of that, if not beyond that. And the comparison that comes with that in so many different areas.
Yeah.
And in our world today, you know, everybody's lives are everywhere. They're all over the internet. You can know what anybody is doing at any time. And that just kind of feeds that, I think, too. You know, you see what so-and-so is doing out with their family on a Saturday, or, you know, so-and-so went on a date night with their husband. And you know, everything is in our face, and it's so easy for the comparison to start there.
Yeah, and a lot of times we're comparing based on very superficial things, and we can let somebody else's airbrushed life, if you want to say it that way. A lot of times we're not posting our negative days on social media, so we're comparing someone's best day with our worst day, and then we're saying, well, I don't measure up. I'm not enough. I'm not like that person. But we're not even comparing reality to reality.
Right.
It's not even a true comparison.
For sure.
And a lot of times it has to do with things like having more money or being in better shape and being prettier or more accomplished or more educated. None of those are bad things until we start to say that I'm not enough unless I have those things. And that's where my worth comes from. And that's where it becomes very dangerous, and we can get into places where then we become insecure because we don't feel like we have enough of those things, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think there are two sides to insecurity, too. Like there's the type that just kind of, you're always focused on putting yourself down and things like that. Or there can be the type of insecurity that makes you feel like I have to be better than that person, or I have to be, you know, if I can be just a little bit better, then I'm doing okay. And that is just like exhausting.
It is. Well, and it's a moving target that you can never catch.
Right.
Because no matter what area you're in, let's say you're super talented at, let's say, singing, because you sing just for fun. But there's always another singer out there that's great. Right. Or as we see this in the entertainment system or media all the time, as people rise as a singer, there's always someone on their heels chasing them.
For sure.
They're chasing some legacy, trying to be big enough to like be lasting and the best. But there's always somebody else out there that's a great singer, that's a great entertainer, that's younger and up and coming. And so you're almost protecting a turf that you can never keep.
Right.
And then if you lose it, you suddenly feel worse about yourself.
Right.
You see this with athletes sometimes, or CEOs. They talk about will either be let go or retire, and then they don't know what to do with themselves because their whole identity and their whole worth and value has been wrapped up in a job or a sport that they've been invested in their whole life. And it's not bad to be diligent or invested, but when we start to derive our worth from that, it really becomes a problem because those things can't last. And then when they're removed or somebody eclipses us in a certain area, suddenly we don't know who we are anymore. And we begin to feel insecure.
Because we're not okay with just being who we are, with just being glad that we have been given what we've been given.
Right.
It's never enough.
Right, because our worth is found in something different. And I think what a lot of these things all have in common when you kind of get to the root of them is we're really chasing the approval of man, whether that's our own approval of ourselves being enough of something or somebody else's approval. Some people chase their parents' approval forever, or their husbands, or a boyfriend, or a peer group, or society. Whatever it is, we're really chasing that to make ourselves feel enough.
Yeah, and that's so unfair to those people too, because you're putting what pressure for them to have for you to find your worth in them.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Fulfilling a need they really can't fulfill.
Yeah. Like, so I need to be God to you,
Right.
really.
Yeah.
The idolatry that comes into that when they become your God, because they are your measure of your worth.
Right.
And the pressure that puts on them too.
Yeah.
But yeah, people pleasing, that's something that is so common in our society. People are just, I'm a people pleaser,
Right.
Like they're just okay with it. They let it be who they are.
Right.
And
we almost don't treat that as a sin. It feels like it's an acceptable thing. I struggle with insecurity. I struggle with people pleasing. And what we're really saying is I struggle with meeting the approval of man and really elevating that to a level that it shouldn't be, that we were more concerned with that than with pleasing the Lord. And even in my own life, that's something that I have had to work through and realize that it's not okay. We almost take it as a personality trait.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a people pleaser. But if we said, I'm prideful, or, I'm a drunk, or
I'm a murderer.
Right.
Like
people would be like, I don't know if we should be owning that.
Exactly. Yeah.
But we do take on insecurity and people pleasing sometimes as just something that makes up part of who we are.
Yeah.
And that's sin, really, because we're exalting our image of ourselves or exalting the approval of man above what the Lord says. And for me in my own life, it's hard sometimes to let people down. And I have 5 kids. I homeschool, busy at church. Right. And there's a lot that I can't do. There are bridal showers that I miss. There's a housewarming thing for a girl that I love that I missed a couple months ago because I just can't do everything. Now, the fleshly, people-pleasing side of me would like to just say yes to everything because I don't want to disappoint you. I don't want to hurt your feelings. Right. But I have to do what the Lord has asked me to do. And I remember many years ago reading that verse that I had read many times in Colossians 3 that talks about doing everything as unto the Lord. And it hit me in a different way that I will never measure up to the expectations of everybody. I can never please everybody. It's not going to happen. But I'm really only supposed to please one person. And I'm supposed to do everything that I do as unto the Lord. And for me, that brought a lot of clarity that I shouldn't be chasing all of this. I really need to narrow down that focus to just pleasing the Lord. And while it's not always easy, it is very simple, if that makes sense. And so I try to keep my priorities in order. And sometimes I can't go to things, I miss stuff, and it's not because I don't love them or, don't want to hurt people, but it's just what it is for me to be obedient to the Lord.
Well, and almost, I would say, there's just such a relief that comes when you can realize that he is the only one that you need to please. There's just kind of like a rest that comes in that, like a load off, like, okay, he is my audience of one.
Right.
He is the only one that I need to please, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And he's okay with that, and that's all that matters.
Yeah. And kind of letting go of sometimes people are going to be mad and disappointed. And sometimes I'm disappointed if someone can't come to something I plan, but also realizing they have to do what's right for them and not holding them hostage to my irritation, and letting them be who they're supposed to be, pleasing the Lord.
Yeah. Well, I think that people-pleasing can come out in so many different ways. Like, for instance, overcommitting yourself because you don't want to disappoint anybody.
Yep.
Sometimes it can be even, like, changing who you are to fit in, or because, you feel like you need to be something more than you are or something less than you are in order to fit in this certain circle or whatever it is. You can also, become controlled by the expectations of others, whether they're good or bad.
Yeah.
So,
I was reading something that said that we can live by people's praise of us and die by their criticism of us.
Yeah.
That we take to heart so much their criticism and seek so much their approval that becomes what controls our lives. And it can lead us into some really bad decisions because we say yes to things that we shouldn't. We think about peer pressure. That's a very obvious one in high school. But even beyond high school and college, I think that can chase us even into adult life. Sometimes I'll see parents making these decisions for their kids that they kind of know are bad decisions, but all the other parents are doing them. They're going to give their 10-year-old a phone or stuff like that, where you just think, I don't know if you were in a vacuum without all these other voices, if you would have made that decision, but you don't want your kid to be the odd one out, and you don't want to be the weird parent that doesn't do the same things. And so we will allow those pressures to then lead us into bad decisions, finances. I mean, the list goes on and on. Yeah. Decisions that we make to chase peer pressure, I guess.
Well, and what people don't realize is in the moment, that peer pressure, makes everything feel okay. My kid is accepted. They don't have to be the weird kid, things like that. But what we don't see is the consequences that are coming down the road, that like something like that could change the course of your child's entire life.
Yeah, right.
It sounds so dramatic, but it's
Right.
true.
Yep.
Even like you were talking about into college and peer pressure there, like choices you make there just because you're hanging out with a certain crowd or, those can change the course of your entire life because you're trying to please a certain group, and we don't see those consequences in the moment.
And I've known a lot of people who could trace back. Sometimes we make a lot of insignificant decisions, like you say, that don't matter. Yeah. And sometimes it's that one that you can trace the entire course of your life back to and say, there was a fork in the road and everything changed there. And a lot of times it is a decision that's made out of a bad motive, and you may not even notice it. I don't even want to say in the moment we're thinking, okay, I'm going to chase the approval of man. Yeah. We just kind of react and do that. And sometimes I don't think we pause long enough to say, is this something that the Lord is asking me to do? And if not, then I shouldn't be doing it because he's the one that I'm supposed to be pleasing.
Right. Yeah. And like we were saying, it is longer consequences, but it also kind of becomes who we are. Maybe they start off as like a little like, oh, I'm a little insecure about this, so I'm just going to make this decision. But then it becomes, like you said, people will define themselves like, oh, I'm a people pleaser. Yeah. I'm insecure. Yeah. You're like, why are you calling yourself that? Why are you allowing this to be what you're saying about your life, about who you are? And they literally... Not they. I mean, I've done it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
We let it infect our hearts. We let it literally become the core of who we are.
And I think it can grow. Like, it might start very small, but it can grow because as you chase the approval of man, I think you need more and more of that. And then you're always afraid of losing it. Yeah. So you're always trying to keep it, which then feeds back into insecurity because you're afraid maybe you're losing it. Yeah. And it's just a losing battle. Mm-hmm. And it really does infect our hearts and who we are, and it makes us, I think, incapable of rejoicing in other people's strengths because we think their strength somehow reflects poorly on us. It shines a magnifying glass on our weakness. So for me to say, oh, you're such a great singer, and then be like, oh, but I'm such a bad singer, Right. That's not what it means. It means that the Lord gifted you with that.
And why is it automatically about you? Right. Like, why can't you be an awesome Bible teacher because God made you an awesome Bible teacher? Right. Why does it have to be like, I'm not as good a Bible teacher? Right. And that just, it's so like strange, but that shows the pride side of insecurity. It's such a focus on self and I'm not good enough and I'm not this and comparing myself to you and why is it even about that?
Right. And we're allowing the gifting of the Lord that he placed in somebody else, instead of taking that, seeing it, and glorifying the Lord, we're then taking that and using it to tear down the image of God in ourselves. And that is sin. That we shouldn't do that. And we become backbiting. We can slander people. I've done it where someone's complimented someone to me and you're like, well, you should see your house.
And you become this horrible person that maybe like, you look back later and you're like, what did I just do? Yeah. Like, who am I?
Right. Because it infects our hearts and also makes us very discontent as people in the world, but then also discontent with ourselves.
And just ungrateful for what we have been given. Yeah. Like, we're so blessed with whatever your life is, wherever you are. You're blessed if you're breathing. Yeah. We should be grateful for that. Right. God has a purpose for that, for you. And, we become ungrateful for that. We, like you said, tearing down the image of God in us. Yeah. We are created in the image of God. Psalm 139, I'll just read this verse. You created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. His works are wonderful. We are his works, and we are wonderful. And, when we think anything contrary to that or let those words come out of our mouth, like you said, it is sin.
And who are we to say his works are not wonderful, even about ourselves? And it's easy sometimes for us to look at other people and say, oh, his works are wonderful in that person. But his works are also wonderful in us. And that's not us being arrogant or prideful. That is simply us recognizing that the creator of the universe specifically designed us and knit us together purposefully. He gave us gifts. He gave us unique personality traits. And we're not supposed to all be like each other. And if we're trying to be somebody else, we're going to fail. And we're going to not fulfill the purpose that God has created for us. And we will not look great. You better off to just be who God called you to be and own that, I guess.
And something you said made me think, sometimes people can think insecurity and humility are the same thing. And like you said, it's not being prideful. It's okay to be confident in what God made you to be
Right.
confident in your giftings, to serve and do what he's called you to do, relying on his strength and his power at work within you. And that's okay.
Right.
You don't have to feel like,
Right.
I am not very good.
Right.
Like, yes, you are, because God gave you that. And that's
Right.
okay. Like, that's a blessing. Let God be glorified in it.
Right. That's not you necessarily taking credit. You shouldn't take credit for
Right.
it because, it talks about the potter who can say to the potter, what have you put in me or whatever. We are his workmanship. I didn't make myself with whatever gifts he gave me. You didn't make yourself with the gifts that he gave to you. But we should allow people to glorify the Lord. It's not very glorifying to the Lord if we're like, oh, no. That's not me,
no, I am good at this because God did this.
God has enabled me to do this. And sometimes you can even say, sometimes it makes me nervous. Sometimes I question, but the Lord empowers me to do it. Yeah. And that gives glory to the Lord for us to use the gifts and to be who he's called us to be. Yeah.
One thing I was going to say about, I was at this thing one time with these women who were all awesome women serving the Lord, and I was thinking about it because we were talking about our purpose and living in our purpose, what God has called us to, and not trying to be somebody else. And anyway, I was at this thing. There were all these women, and they're all serving in full-time ministry, and they have children, and they're busy women. And they weren't bragging about what they were doing in their lives. They were just sharing, we were just sitting around drinking coffee, sharing about life. And I was sitting there, like, some of the things that they were saying, I was like, oh my gosh, like, for those of you that don't know, I don't have children. I am married, but I don't have children. So that's obviously just something that I don't understand, and the things that you carry, the things you do, the responsibility that is. But a lot of these women did have children, and then they're serving. Some of them are working other jobs on top of serving full time. And I just sat there and felt like, I am garbage. I am not doing anything right for the Lord. I could be carrying so much more. Like, how are they doing all this stuff in the time that they have? I complain about being busy, and I'm not doing half that stuff. And I just started getting all these thoughts in my head, and I went home and just felt like, man, I'm a failure. But there were two ways that I could have taken that. And the next day, I kind of sat down and processed through it, like, I can feel like this. I can feel insecure, and I can feel like I'm not doing anything for the kingdom. Or I can look at it and let their faithfulness push me to more faithfulness. Because on one hand, I have to realize that God didn't call me what he called them to.
Right.
He called me to what he called me to, and I need to live in that purpose. He purposed me for good works that he prepared for me to do.
Yes.
Not for you to do, not for those other women to do, for me. And I have to live in that and be faithful in that with what he's called me to right now. But I also need to look and see, have I gotten lazy in some areas? Am I not being faithful in some areas? And I think sometimes we claim insecurity about things that we're not willing to put in the work to change. I mean, this is just sounds like a silly example, but not really. Like, if I want to be thinner, like, I need to eat healthy and exercise. Right. I can't complain about not being in the best shape if I'm not willing to put in that work. That's like a very practical example that we see in our lives today. But it's the same thing about, your spiritual relationship with the Lord, being able to, are you spending time in the Word? Are you spending time with him? If you're not, you're not going to grow. You're not going to, be able to be used more if you're not growing. Right. And so I just felt super challenged by that. Like, I'm not allowed to complain about things that I'm not willing to put in work to change. Yeah. And it was, really challenging to me. And, I mean, I think that applies in so many other areas of our life.
That's good. I like that a lot because we can sometimes look and be disappointed in ourselves or annoyed at what somebody has.
Got a little feather over there.
Fuzzy coming down. Wasn't sure what that was. But like you say, we're not willing to, we haven't put in the same things that they have, but we're still expecting the same result. Yeah. Maybe someone's marriage is blessed and yours isn't. Well, you haven't walked in faithfulness as a wife who you're called to be, but then you're looking and saying, but I want the result that they have after 10 years of trying to both of them be godly, And then we can feel insecure about our marriage and, whatever. And I also think, too, I liked what you said about, looking at and examining your own life, that it's really important that we do that, because I do think sometimes in an area where we feel like that, God does want to grow us. And people don't necessarily start off with a huge suitcase full of things that they're carrying. Mm-hmm. They're working their way into that by little faithfulness in the small areas that God gifted them. And maybe for some of our people watching, they feel like, I don't really have much to offer. Be faithful in the little bit that you have. And the Lord, you might watch him expand that and entrust you with more as you were faithful with the little. And someday someone might look at you and say, how did they carry so much? Well, it's just a bit-by-bit process as he stretches you and he grows you and expands you into something usable and refines you in various ways, that none of the gifts are wasted if we don't allow them to be wasted. Mm-hmm. And maybe sometimes we should be a little busier employing our gifts than looking at other people.
Really? Right. Like, we spend so much time on social media, like, wow, look at their life. Wow, mine's horrible. And, like, get off your phone and go do something for the Lord.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Like, what are you wasting?
There's plenty of, what does it say? Fields are white unto harvest. There's plenty of harvest to be harvested, so.
Right, get to work.
Get walking.
Okay, so I guess, you said earlier about how insecurity comes from putting our confidence in the wrong source. That's what you said. So what should that source be? Where does our confidence lie?
The only value that we have is the value that God gave us. That's it. Mm-hmm. We do a lot of things. Our lives are made up of many different things, but our worth ultimately is in the value of being purchased by Jesus Christ and him declaring us loved and precious. It says that we are honored in his sight, that we are his child. We are heirs, co-heirs with him. There's all, you could study this out for a long time and see all the different things that the Bible says that we are in Christ. And that is where our worth comes from. And those things can't be diminished. They can't be tainted. They can't be tarnished. They can't be, taken away. No one can take that from us. They are unchanging, whether you're employed or unemployed, whether you can have kids or you can't, whether you're married or not. Those are enduring. Mm-hmm. And that is where we find our worth in who Christ says that we are.
Because our worth isn't based on us. It's based on him and who he says that we are.
Right. And that doesn't change. And, we should, if we struggle, if this is an area of struggle, then you should spend some time getting to know who you are in Christ. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of, we could maybe figure out a way to put some Bible verses or something. I was thinking
we don't have time to read them all, but even, just things that God says that we are, and we can put those down in the comments or show notes or whatever they're called, whatever platform you're listening on. We have people to do that.
Right. It's not me, because that's not my gifting.
Right. And so knowing that and knowing that it is based on him, what's the fix for us to battle against this insecurity? Yeah. How do we do it?
Well, I think the first thing is we need to admit it. We need to call it sin. Mm-hmm. This is not good in my life. This is infecting my heart. This is affecting my life and those around me, because really it doesn't just affect us. It affects those that we're with. If we're insecure, it's affecting our friends, our spouse, our household, whatever it is. And so we need to take a good, honest look at it and recognize it as sin and decide that we're going to fight it. And I think one of the biggest things I'm going to make a statement here. I don't think there's a person in the world that doesn't struggle in some form or fashion with insecurity. Yeah. In some area, you get in some place and you just feel like, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But we need to look at what particular brand of insecurity Satan attacks us with. Mm-hmm. And then we need to go to war and fight it with the truth. Mm-hmm. So if you feel like you are not adequate enough for some task that God has called you to, right? There's a verse in 2 Corinthians 3 that I love. Check me. I think it's 3:5. Maybe I'll just flip there and make sure. I'm pretty sure it's 2 Corinthians 3:5. I love this verse, and it says that we aren't adequate in ourselves. It says, such confidence we have through Christ toward God. Not that we're adequate in ourselves to consider anything as coming from ourselves, but our adequacy is in God, who made us adequate as servants of a new covenant. Mm-hmm. That he's the one that gives us that. And so maybe you're called to a particular area, you're in a new job, or there's some ministry, or you feel like the Lord has given you 17 kids and you really only have the capacity for 2, Whatever area it is that you just feel like, I don't have this capacity, it's okay to say, I don't have this capacity, but I don't have to, because there's a dependency on the Lord that is created then by our trusting him to make us adequate for a particular task. Mm-hmm. So whatever it is, whatever brand of insecurity is yours, you need to look at it, take an honest, good look at it, and then find the truth to combat it. Mm-hmm. And then
That verse, I think it's 2 Corinthians
10.
Take every thought captive that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. Like,
right.
If you want to know what the knowledge of God is, close.
Good job.
If you want to know what the knowledge of God is, it's in the Word. And then, anything that is coming against that and does not line up with it, you tear it down.
Right.
And
and in that moment, you can feel it sometimes. I don't know what it is for different people. Some women will tell me they won't come to a women's function or retreats a couple months down the road, and they'll say, I'll never go. I don't know anybody, and it's just so intimidating for me. But you need to figure out where that is when you start to feel that well up in you, because you can feel it, and you're either going to decide, I'm going to run with this and become really insecure, and I'm either going to overtalk to compensate or stop talking at all, or whatever the insecurity makes you do. Or you're going to say, okay, I'm feeling in this moment, I can feel this insecurity welling up in me, and I'm going to take captive this thought, and I'm not going to do this. I'm going to remind myself, even if you're in a public place, in the quietness of my own mind, I'm going to remind myself of what is true, that the giftings that I have are enough, that the Lord has fearfully and wonderfully made me, that I am his child, I am beloved, and my worth is in him, not in anything here. And walk in the freedom of that, because that's what we were redeemed for, was freedom.
Right, yeah. So call it out, see that it's sin. We need to be willing to say that to ourselves sometimes, like, this is sin, and that's a scary thing to do, because then you have to deal with it when you call it what it is, and then combat it with the truth. So if you're watching, that's what we're asking, what God is asking us to walk out this week, to look at your life. Like Erin said, what is your brand of insecurity? What is the type that you struggle with, the area that you need to combat it in, and then find out the truth about it. Find the knowledge of God and go combat the lies of the enemy and the lies that we tell ourselves about us not being good enough, or somebody else being better than we are. And so that's our challenge for you this week. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that God spoke to you somehow through it. If you want to drop any type of comment or questions down below, do that, share this, get it out to other women who might struggle with the same exact thing. And next month, we're really excited. We are going to have a special guest. Not quite going to release who it is yet, but I know you guys will really enjoy her and her story. And we will see you next month. Bye.